I was born with the ocean in my blood and salt in my lungs. That's not poetic exaggeration. My family's roots traced back 7 generations on the eastern shore of Kauai, on land that had never known concrete or corruption until the mainlanders came with their clipboards and their suits and their sunburns, pretending they understood aloha. We didn't have much in the way of wealth, at least not in their eyes, but we had a strip of shoreline that danced with sea turtles and glowed with lava stones. Land passed down from my great-great-great-grandfather, who'd built the first canoe by hand and fed his entire village through storms and droughts. Our beach wasn't for sale, never had been, not even when resorts sent letters padded with zeros, not even when the county tried to rezone it for eco-tourism without our consent. But nothing prepared me for the HOA. They didn't wear uniforms, they didn't show up with badges, but they were worse than either because they had the law, or at least the money to twist it. It started with a letter, cream-colored with a gold seal at the top that read East Kauai Development Coalition, which sounded like some kind of environmental group. It wasn't. It was an HOA made up of California transplants who had bought up land around mine. They'd built luxury homes, curved cul-de-sacs with artificial grass, imported palm trees, and a gate that required a code to enter. And they didn't like the fact that, nestled between their pristine houses, sat my family's land, raw, wild, unkempt in their eyes, free in ours. The letter was short. Mr. Keahi, as per Ordinance 12B and the Shoreline Modernization Act, your property has been rezoned under EK Residential Overlay. The EKDC will assume management of all shoreline access points to ensure community safety and coastal erosion mitigation. Effective immediately, your beach rights have been suspended pending evaluation. Thank you for your cooperation. I laughed at first, then I read it again. And again. They were trying to take my shoreline. The same one where I'd learned to swim before I could walk. The same one where my father's ashes had been scattered. The same one where my son, Kimo, had caught his first fish. I drove straight to the county office, my truck rattling with fury. I was met with a secretary who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. I demanded to see the county zoning manager. She said he was unavailable. I showed her the letter. She read it and said, yes, this is part of the Shoreline Revitalization Initiative. Very standard. I asked her how a private HOA could claim land that was clearly in my name. She shrugged. I think they filed an easement request through Act 208. You'll need to speak with legal. Legal was a dead end, so I went to court. It dragged on for 11 months. I brought my family's deed, weathered with time, ink faded but clear. I brought testimony from elders, maps drawn in the 1800s, photos of my father on the beach from when Nixon was still in office. But they had lawyers. They had a geospatial consultant who argued that, due to the shifting nature of the shoreline, the beach in question had migrated over time, and that land deemed as public easement adjacent to protected development zones could be reassigned for the collective benefit. They spoke in language meant to confuse. They spoke as if sand could be bought. The judge ruled that I retained ownership of the upland property, but the shoreline, 120 yards deep, was to be transferred to the HOA under a managed stewardship clause. I didn't even know what that meant until I saw the bulldozers. They came in the night, flattened the dunes, tore down the native naupaka bushes, installed temporary fencing with signs that read, Private Property, HOA Residents Only. They paved part of the sand. I watched from my porch as cranes dropped concrete pylons into the place where my son had built driftwood castles. I watched as engineers in hard hats pointed at blueprints and laughed, while contractors carved driveways into land that had only ever known feet and sea foam. They built 12 luxury villas in the first phase. Each sold for over $2.4 million. Then came more, 30, then 50. The final count? 120 modern homes complete with security cameras, solar roofs, underground irrigation, and a private beach club built on my family's sacred tide pools. They said it was progress. They said it brought jobs. But all I saw was theft wrapped in luxury. My neighbors changed from fishermen and hula teachers to lawyers and venture capitalists who drove Teslas and waved at me like I was their gardener. Some of them didn't even know there had been a family here before. They'd host rooftop luau's and play ukulele on Bluetooth speakers, singing words they didn't understand. I tried to ignore them. I tried to teach my son what mattered, how to fish with patience, how to feel the ocean's moods, how to listen when the wind shifted. But it's hard to raise a warrior when your history's been paved over. Then came the storm warnings. It was the third week of August. The news said there had been seismic activity near Tonga, unusual, deep tremors triggering fault lines no one had touched in decades. The meteorologists weren't alarmed yet, just cautiously observing. But I saw it in the birds. They vanished. No mynas, no frigate birds, not even the damn chickens. And the dogs? Silent. I stood on my porch and felt the air grow thick, like it was holding its breath. I told my son to pack a bag. By nightfall, the water had pulled back. Not a wave in sight, just exposed reef and fish flapping on wet sand. The tourists came out with phones. They always do. Some of the HOA folks stood at the edge of the new seawall they'd installed, sipping wine. One guy in linen pants said to his wife, "Look how far the tide's gone out. I've never seen this before." I stood there, just watching. You could feel the dread in your bones if you listened. It didn't come like a roar. It came like silence breaking. First the rumble, then the growl, then the water rose, not as a wave, but as a wall, and the world seemed to tilt. The beach club was the first to go. A white building with bamboo railings and tiki torches. It shattered like a matchbox under the pressure. Homes crumpled like paper. The sea reclaimed what was stolen. The HOA gate whipped from its hinges. Roads buckled. Imported palm trees floated like arrows pointing inland. I grabbed my son and we ran to the hills where the ancestors waited. From the ridge, we watched the ocean clean the wound. The tide took it all. And when it was done, nothing remained. Just sand. Just stone. Just the beginning. The sea gives, the sea takes. And when it takes, it does not ask politely. By dawn, the storm surge had receded into a ghostly calm, the shoreline eerily pristine, like the destruction had never happened, like it had never been touched by human hands. The villas, the imported gardens, the infinity pools, gone, reduced to driftwood, glass, and silence. Only the bones of foundations jutted from the ground like ribs exposed in the sand. The HOA was no longer a coalition. It was a memory. Rescue crews didn't arrive for 6 hours. Roads were buried under debris, and the airspace was grounded due to chaotic winds. We had radioed in from the high ridge. There were a few of us, maybe 12 in total, local families who knew the land like they knew their own blood pressure. We had trusted the signs, the wind, the birds, the ancestors. The others had trusted concrete. They'd tried to write it out. I saw bodies pulled from shattered balconies, tourists clinging to palm trunks, security guards washed into the forest, still wearing earpieces that no longer worked. One woman screamed into the wind about her lost Pomeranian, while rescue teams dug through splinters looking for actual people. No one asked about the land, but I know it had simply taken itself back. FEMA came, the Red Cross too. News choppers whirled over us. CNN showed drone footage of what they called Hawaii's modern Atlantis.
They interviewed a man in designer flip-flops in a torn Gucci shirt who sobbed on camera about losing his $3.2 million dream home. Said he only moved in last month.
No one interviewed me. Why would they? I was the brown-skinned man sitting on the ridge, arms crossed, unmoved, while the world gawked at nature's revenge. They didn't see the sacredness. They didn't see the full circle. Until the reporters began asking why the only structure still standing was my grandfather's old wooden hale, a thatched roof shelter built 50 years ago with hand tools, angled just right to bend with the wind, not fight it. They asked me what it meant. I told them the ocean doesn't care about market value. I became a meme for a few days. Hail Man, they called me, the Hawaiian prophet. Influencers posted pictures on what remained of the bluff, barefoot, eyes closed, writing captions like he warned them but they didn't listen. I hadn't warned anyone. I hadn't needed to. Warnings are for those who forget their guests. Then the lawsuits came. Families of the dead, developers, the state, everyone blaming someone else. The HOA, what was left of it, tried to deflect liability. They blamed the engineers. The engineers blamed the permitting office. The permitting office blamed historical shoreline migration data. In the end, none of them blamed the ocean. They should have. But I didn't get involved. Not directly. My involvement came in a quieter form. 3 weeks after the wave, when the rescue operations had finished and the camera crews had moved on to the next tragedy, I returned to the sand. My son, Kimo, stood beside me. He was silent, holding a piece of charred wood with a house number still etched into it, number 44 Coral View Drive. He threw it back into the sea. I picked up a rake, a simple old metal one, and I started clearing the land. Not rebuilding, restoring. We cut down the metal fencing that had somehow survived. We gathered the artificial turf, rolled it up like carpets of sin, and hauled it to the dump. Volunteers arrived, real ones. Aunties from the mountains, cousins from Hilo, fishermen who remembered when this land had hosted bonfires and chants under the stars, not brunches and catered sushi. We didn't pour concrete. We planted. Kukui trees, tie leaves, sugarcane and banana and taro. We didn't rebuild to profit. We rebuilt to remember. Weeks turned to months. Then came a knock at my door. A man in a polo shirt and expensive leather shoes stood on my porch. He looked sunburned and out of place, introduced himself as Anthony Lowell, the original chairman of the HOA, or what was left of it. He said, "I want to talk." I didn't respond, just stared. He glanced back at the ocean like it might reach for him again. He said, "We're trying to rebuild, reorganize, apply for federal grants, reestablish residential zoning. I'd like to extend a hand." I raised my eyebrows. A hand? He held out a folder. Inside were blueprints, reconstruction plans, smaller footprint, environmentally conscious, solar-powered, native plant landscaping, a beachfront cultural center to honor the original heritage. He spoke in buzzwords, in reconciliation, in damage control. I stared at the folder, then at him. I said, "You want to build again?" He nodded. I handed the folder back. "Then I hope the ocean forgets your name." He left, more politely than I expected, but I never saw him again. The county tried, of course. New permits, new plans, all couched in eco-friendly vocabulary. But public pressure was louder now. The tsunami had left a scar in memory. Native groups rose up. Petitions flew. A councilwoman from Oahu went viral for calling it an unforgivable desecration undone by the gods themselves.
And so, for once, the government listened. They declared the shoreline a protected cultural restoration zone. It could never be built on again. Not by me, not by them, not by anyone. The land was left to breathe. My son, now 16, took over the restoration effort, started a nonprofit, taught visiting students about ancestral tide pools, organized youth to plant native flora and remove invasive species. Kids from private schools flew in to hear him speak about the balance between progress and preservation. He told them what I told him. The ocean doesn't forget. The tsunami wasn't revenge. It was a reset.